All right, just give it a second. Sometimes my web browser is extremely slow. All right, hey guys, good afternoon. I hope you guys are having a good day. It's Kevin here with Ryan again, and I'm gonna leave the floor to Ryan and tell him what we're gonna do today and what's gonna happen today.
Hi guys, thank you for taking the time to tune in today and to watch this lesson. What we're going to do in today's lesson, I'm going to show you how to create a traditional Active Directory domain controller in Azure. And we're going to use that domain controller's DNS, not the Azure's DNS. And then once we've created that domain controller, we're going to go ahead and install AD Connect. And we are then going to try to sync up our Active Directory with our Azure Active Directory and see if that's going to work. And hopefully we'll have fun. So we're going to go through a short PowerPoint slide so that you guys can actually see AD Connect and what it's all about. So hopefully you guys should be able to see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yep, I see it.
Right, so we're just going to go through a short PowerPoint slide so that you understand what AD Connect is, just an overview, and then we'll get into the hands-on lab. So we're going to do, what is AD Connect? We're going to deploy an AD DC in the portal, and of course, install AD Connect to Azure AD. So let's just. So first of all, the prereqs, you need to have an Azure subscription. If you don't have one, create one, it's free. And of course, you need to install a Windows 2012 server or later with Active Directory on it, or a domain controller /DC. And AD Connect must be installed on the domain joined Windows Server 2012 or later. Important, you cannot use AD Connect with SBS Server and Windows Core. It's not supported. So if you've got a core server, whether it's 2012 or 2019, it's not supported. SBS 2011, is not supported as well. So just so that you guys have a heads up there. Again, AD Connect servers need DNS resolution both for intranet and internet. The DNS server must be able to resolve names both on your on-prem and your Active Directory to the Azure AD endpoints. They need to be able to talk to each other. I mean, AD Connect requires connectivity to be configured on the domains. And hence the reason we're going to use our Active Directory DNS and not the Azure DNS. And of course, most importantly, you need the admin account credentials for the Windows server. You need the username and password, as well as your Azure permissions to install AD Connect, and of course, to connect to Azure as well. So AD Connect is Microsoft's tool designed to meet and accomplish your hybrid goals. And when we mean hybrid, that means companies would have Active Directory servers on premise, and they would have Active Directory in Azure. So hybrid means a mixture of cloud and on-prem. Of course, it provides the following features: password hash synchronization. A sign-in method synchronizes a hash for users on-prem's AD password to the Azure AD password. And of course, the synchronization also includes those password hashes so that you can sync over and do single sign-on. Of course, AD Connect again is used to synchronize user accounts, group memberships, credentials, hashes from on-prem stuff to Azure AD. For example, if a user changes their password using Azure AD self-service password management, this password is then updated back to the on-prem environment as well. So it's kind of helping you move away from a hybrid to the full Azure cloud solution if you want. But again, like I say, a lot of companies spend a lot of money on hardware and equipment. I don't see the companies getting rid of that hardware because it costs a lot of money. So hence the reason we have a hybrid environment. And of course, if it's Microsoft, Microsoft plays nicely with Microsoft as well. In other words, Microsoft AD and Microsoft Azure AD are made by the same company. Therefore, we have less issues. Of course, AD is great for managing traditional on-prem infrastructure and applications. AD is great for managing access to the cloud applications as well. You can use both together. If you want to have a purely cloud environment, then just use Azure AD. If you want to have a hybrid environment, you need to then have Azure AD Connect. Or if you don't want to use Azure, you just use your standard domain controller as you would normally do that. Again, the nice thing about Azure AD Connect, there's no extra cost. That's cool. That's nice. There's no other cost to run it. It's a free tool. Of course, on your traditional environment, you can see here we'd have our AD server with Active Directory on it. And then, of course, we would then use AD Connect and we would sync to Azure Active Directory. So what we're going to do in our lab layout, this just gives you an idea. We're going to simulate an AD DC on-prem. We're going to create an AD connector, and we're then going to try and sync up to Azure AD. So obviously the first phase is installing the server, installing Active Directory, then installing AD Connect, and then of course, phase 3, connecting it up to Azure, and then the lab is complete. What I do encourage you guys to do is go over to the Microsoft link there and find out more about your hybrid environment. Again, this is just a huge overview to give you a fundamental understanding of what AD Connect does. So I'm going to go ahead and fire up my portal, and you should all be able to see my portal. Can you all see that?
Right now we see your PDF still.
Okay, give me a second. I will.
Thank you, Jacob, for just donated $20. Thank you, Jacob.
Cool.
You said thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your knowledge.
So you should. So there we go. I'm going to fire that up and say share. Can you see it now?
Yep. I see I see your web browser and I see everything. Yep.
Yeah. So before we get into AD Connect, if you go to Azure and you log into your portal and you move over to Azure Active Directory and you scroll down, you got custom domain. And in your custom domain names, this is where you can go and add a custom domain. So for example, you could see that was the default domain created by Microsoft. And these are other domains that I have. And of course, you could go in there and sync your domain up so that at least when you have your users, they'll be, say, ryan@myazure.guru.com or kevin@myazure.guru.com. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and create our server. So let's scoot over and we'll move over into our virtual machines and we'll create our virtual server. But before we do that, we need to create a resource group. The reason we want to create that resource group is because we need to have a resource group to put all of our infrastructure in. And if we have that resource group, then when it comes to deleting our infrastructure, we're deleting the whole lot. And as you can see, I've got a resource group that I've already created called AD Lab. And you can see there's absolutely nothing in that AD Lab. So again, it's pretty straightforward. If you're not too sure how to create a resource group, I'll just quickly do that for you. I'll just go in here and just quickly delete that one there. I'll just say copy, delete that resource group. I want to do this from the ground up, guys. It won't take long so that you know how that's done. This is going to go away and it's going to delete that resource group. You can see from the bell notification here that it's deleting that resource group. So while that resource group is deleting, let's go and create a new one so that we can get up and running. So again, I've gone to resource groups. I'm going to paste in my resource group. I've got this in Notepad. I'm going to keep it in the East US. I'm going to click review and click create. Once I've created my resource group, the next thing I want to do is go ahead and create my virtual machine. So I'm going to go ahead and create my virtual machine, and this is going to be my DC. So I'm going to go ahead and create, like I say, my DC there. So again, once just a heads up, once we create our virtual machine, you'll see a few things that come into play. But also what we want to do is we want to actually make sure that when we create our virtual machine, we're going to create and attach a disk to it. And this is the disk that we are going to use in order to connect to our environment. So let's go ahead and let's first of all create an on-prem network so that we can simulate an on-prem environment. And that will be pretty straightforward. So all we would do is we come down to virtual networks. I'm going to go and click create a virtual network, or you could click this create button here. I'm going to select that resource group and I'm going to call this network on-prem. And I'm going to leave it, say for argument's sake, in the East US. We want it there. So I'm going to go next. I'm going to accept the default address range here, but I'm going to move down and I'm going to change the subnet range so that we can at least, because we don't need to have this type of subnet. So I'm going to go ahead here to the default. I'm just going to change my subnet range. Just give me a sec. And of course, we can go ahead and we can call this one, I don't know, let's just call it VM network so that we've got an understanding. I'm going to go ahead and click save. And then that's going to save that there. I'm going to go ahead and go to security. Obviously, we're going to leave everything as the default, and we're not going to worry about tagging. If I clicked on tagging, we can go and tag stuff and put information in there, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to click review and create. And this is going to go away. It's going to do a validation process. And I'm going to click create. And this is now going to create that VNet for us. And this is where we're going to go and shove in our server into this particular VNet. And as you can see, this deployment's in progress. So we'll just wait for this deployment to continue. And it shouldn't take too long to deploy. And there we go, it's done. So I'm going to go ahead now and create my virtual machine. I'm going to click add, select a virtual machine. And then we're going to go ahead, I'm going to throw it into that AD lab. And I'll just call this one DC01 so that we know it's an Active Directories machine. Again, if you had availability zones, you could always go to zones and you could go to availability sets. And over here, you could go ahead and create a new availability set if you wanted to, but we're not going to talk about that. So we're going to leave everything at the default. And I'm going to go down and I'm just going to give my username. I'll call this VS admin. Make it all lowercase. I'll go ahead and type in a password. I'll go ahead and type that password again. And of course, we're going to leave the default RDP port open. Obviously, in a real world, you'd want to use just-in-time access and lock that down. But we're not too worried about that. So we're going to go next. Of course, for disks, you could come down here, and if it's a domain controller, you could use standard HDD if you wanted to connect with that. Again, we want to create a new disk, and the reason we want to create a new disk here, this is where we want to install Active Directory too. And we want to create a disk so that, because by default, some of the Azure disks, when you shut stuff down and reboot stuff up again, they're ephemeral disks, so your data could be deleted. But also in the real world, if something goes wrong with your domain controller, the last thing you want is to wipe all your Active Directory information. Because if that happens, then your life will become very interesting. So obviously, we're not going to use this. We're going to go ahead and say change the size. I'm going to choose a local standard HDD, and I'm just going to make it 10 gig. We only need 10 gig because all it's doing is hosting our Active Directory information on it. And then obviously we'll just click OK. Now we're going to go through to networking. Obviously, we're going to make sure we're on the on-prem network. We can see here we've got our public IP address, which is fine. And of course, we're going to go down and accept the defaults. We'll just go next. And of course, we'll disable boot diagnostics because we're not going to be doing any boot diagnostics. We just want to get to grips with getting our DC up. And of course, we'll go next. And of course, you could tag it if you wanted to, review and create. And the reason I'm going through these steps is you can see if I make any errors. And as you can see, I've got an error here, and that's probably because I didn't give the virtual machine a name. So we'll see. And the nice thing is if you come back into our basics, there we go. It's because I was talking about availability set. And remember I said, let's create a availability set or availability zone. So again, I could create new, and I could call this, I'll just call this AD set. And this will give us our fault domains. And you'll probably come across this in your Azure Active Directory exam if you do the AZ900. So I'm just going to click OK. And now if I go ahead and say review and create, this will go ahead and create my virtual machine. I should get a validation. It will tell me that everything has been successful. And I'll click review and create. Once the server is up and running, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and install Active Directory. But the key here is we want to use the Active Directory DNS, not the Azure DNS. Because if we accept the Azure DNS and you try to do an AD sync, it's not going to work. It's just going to die in the water and you're going to run straight into a brick wall. And I'll show you what I mean as soon as we get there. Again, we'll just have to be a little bit patient while this server deploys. It shouldn't take too long to deploy. I'm going to go ahead and dismiss this notification. And we'll just let this bad boy go away and deploy. And then once it's deployed, we can actually log into that server and install Active Directory. And then once Active Directory is installed, we can go ahead and use AD Connect. So we just give it a second while it installs. As you can see, it's creating that availability set. That available set would be used for redundancy. So if I had another server in place, I could actually have that server there as well. This is good practice to do. This is how you do it in the real world. Obviously, in a lab, you wouldn't have to worry about availability sets and things like that. I'm trying to simulate it so it's as close as possible to a real world environment. And the nice thing about this lab is you can use it to learn Active Directory on-prem yourself and get a good understanding of how an on-prem network would work as opposed to a lab that we would just do and would follow step 1, 2, and 3. So, okay, that's great. I've done that lab. And then you get into the real world and you'll see things are really different. And you'll find as well, a good engineer, if you've got an on-prem server, would obviously install his Active Directory services on a separate disk, specifically to keep it safe and protected in case that server falls over. At least you've got the AD information, because remember, Active Directory is like a telephone book. It has all of your users' information. For example, Office 365, Exchange, your security groups, your OUs, your policies. If you have on-prem stuff, they all come from Active Directory. So if that Active Directory schema gets messed up, it's a big job to fix it, because a server blue screened or that server just died for some reason, and then you're in hot water. And we don't want to actually go down that road. So again, prevention is always a good thing to have. I mean, you can't prevent a server from going down, but you can try to mitigate as many issues as possible within your power or within your reach. So I'm going to just close that down. We'll go to our resource. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to connect to this virtual machine. So normally what I want to show you something as well before I connect to that virtual machine. If I go to my virtual networks and I go to my on-prem network and I go to my DNS servers, you see this is the the default DNS server for Azure. We don't want that. We want to go and add our DNS server, but we can't add our DNS server in there because we haven't installed DNS. So we need to install DNS before we can get up and running with Active Directory. And we'll come back and change that, but I just wanted to show you that. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to download this RDP client. I'm going to just download it. I'm going to open it up in here. I'll just quickly edit it so that we don't have such, and then I'm going to say connect and say connect. And this is going to go away and connect. I'm going to type in the this admin. I'm going to type in my password.
We actually, do I see the file? I don't see the RDP.
Okay, I will do that now. Just give me a second. Let's see what's going on.
Probably have to put it on that screen.
Can you see it now?
Now we see it. Yep.
Cool.
There we go.
There we go. And I'm just going to drag this over so that you can see that. And here's my Windows server. So obviously, in order to install our server, we wait for Server Manager to fire up. And the first thing we want to do is we want to go and mount or attach that disk that we created. Remember, we created a disk for Active Directory. So that's the first thing we want to do. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to scoot over to Tools. And we're going to go to Computer Management when it decides to open up. And we will go and attach that disk. Well, obviously we'll format it and attach that disk. So the reason it's a little bit slow is because I'm just using the HDD drive. I'm not using SSD. This will save you on costs. I'm going to go down to Disk Management. And you can see there's that disk that we created, that 10 gig disk. So I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say New Simple Volume. I'm going to go Next, 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 and Finish. So now we've got that new simple volume set up. We can go ahead and install Active Directory. So I'm going to go ahead and close that bad boy down. So what I'm going to do for this lab is I'm just going to make a couple of changes because I don't want to be fighting with a few things. Obviously, in the real world, you wouldn't want to do this. I want us to get through this lab so you guys can get some hands-on experience working with creating your own DNS. Obviously, I'm going to go down. I'm going to turn enhanced security off because I don't need this for now. Again, this is just a lab. I'm also just temporarily going to disable the firewall because I've got a whole lot of other things going on. So I don't want to be spending the evening troubleshooting bits and pieces. Obviously, in the real world, you wouldn't want to disable your firewall. You want to keep your firewall on so that you can connect. But because this is a lab scenario, I just want us to try and work through the lab without spending half the night or half the day trying to troubleshoot if there is something. So obviously we can go through here and we can make sure remote management's enabled. We can click on our firewall over here and I'll just disable this temporary because again, I don't want to be fighting to get stuff done as we work through, and then I'll just turn that off. In the real world, you wouldn't have to worry about this. This would all work through absolutely fine. We'll just do a refresh. Now we can go ahead and install Active Directory. So again, I'm going to go to Roles and Features. I'm going to go Next. I'm going to select Role-Based Feature Installation. I'm going to go Next. I'm going to select my server DC1. It's a 2019 data center server or 2016. I'm going to install Active Directory Domain Services. This is going to go ahead and install a whole lot of other tools for us. I'm going to go ahead and click Add Features. I'm going to go Next. I'm going to go Next. And obviously it's telling us about Azure as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say Next. I always like to enable this because sometimes the server may require a reboot and it's good to have it in there. Sometimes you may install something and something doesn't work. You'll find once you've rebooted the server, it'll start working. So I'm going to go ahead and click Install. And this is not installing Active Directory yet. This is just prepping the components so that we can install Active Directory. It's installing the features that we need in order to get Active Directory to run. And again, this can take a couple of minutes to go away and do its thing. So we'll just kind of sit here and wait a little bit while this goes and installs these different features for us. Once these features have been installed, we can then promote this server to an Active Directory server. And you can have your hybrid environment with as many Active Directory servers as you want. Most companies would have at least 2 AD servers on-prem. The reason they would have 2 AD servers is because if one server went down, then Active Directory can still run. People can still get the information. All the resources can still be served up to your users. Where if you only had one domain controller and Active Directory went down, your whole company's down because they won't be able to access their resources. And Exchange is integrated with Active Directory as well. So that could also cause issues as well if you have mail running on Exchange 2010, 2013, 2016, or 29 Exchange servers. If you have Azure Active Directory, obviously you can add 365 and then you'll be good to go. And you'll be up and running as well. So you have Active Directory in both places. So you're not going to be caught between a rock and a hard place. So we'll just kind of wait for this to go. It's kind of thinking.
I was going to ask you a question, Ryan.
Yep,
So
yep.
what's the when you install AD Connect? Well, let's just wait to install AD Connect. I know there are different options for AD Connect, right? When it comes to syncing things over. I was going to ask you a question about that, but let's wait till you actually do it. So.
Okay. So now we've deployed all these resources. We can now promote this to a domain controller. So we can select promote. And if we had an existing domain controller, we could add it to an existing domain. We could add a domain to an existing forest, but this is a new forest. So we'll call this, say, my Azure guru.com. Now, I just want to give you guys a heads up. In the past, you'd have to type, Microsoft would say, oh no, you need to have your domain name, for example, myazure.guru.local or something like that. You don't need to do that anymore. With 2016 and 2019, you don't have to worry about that legacy thing. You can actually type your domain name in there and we'll be good to go. So as you can see here, I've got my domain name, myazure.guru.com. So I'm going to go ahead and go next. And this is now asking me for a password. And this password here is, so if you ever want to uninstall Active Directory, it's going to ask you for a password. And the reason this is there, it's because if you uninstall Active Directory, you can bring your whole company down and cause a lot of strife. So by having a password there, it's just affirming, are you sure you really want to do this? You know, this is a bad idea, but if you want to do it, enter the password. And as you can see, this is has a forest functional level of 2016. And you can see you can use it on, if you had servers that were running 2008, hopefully you haven't got those in your environment, but believe it or not, some people still have them. So if you have 2008 R2 servers or 2012 servers, you need to make sure that you select 2012 or 2008. Because if you don't, this Active Directory server won't be able to talk to those other servers. And then you'll wonder, well, why aren't these servers talking to each other? That's because the functional level is different. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to paste in my password. Type in my password again here. And I'm going to go ahead and go next. This is going to tell us about some DNS issues. Obviously, we haven't installed DNS. It's just giving us more of a warning. A lot of you that have installed Active Directory would see these familiar warnings. And obviously, this is going to go and give us our NetBIOS name. And by default, it'll truncate the NetBIOS name. So if your NetBIOS name is more than 37 characters, it's going to truncate it to something a lot shorter. So again, you can go ahead and change that if you wanted to. That's up to you. But again, it's always good to try and keep it the same. So I'm going to go ahead and go next. Your domain name can be whatever you want to call it. So this is going to go away and it's going to now get ready to install Active Directory for us. So as you can see now, this is where we want to go and change our disk. So our disk was actually F. So I'm going to change that to F because we want to install Active Directory on that 10 gig disk we've made. And that way we know our Active Directory schema is safe and it's protected in case something does go bump in the night. We know we're not going to be in hot water. Sometimes by default, a lot of you may have just installed Active Directory, go next, and just installed it on C drive. I mean, that's also fine, but this is just best practice to kind of learn to do things this way. I'm going to go ahead next. This is going to go along. And it's going to give us a whole lot of information. It's going to tell us it's a global catalog server and other bits and pieces. We'll just say next. And of course, it's now going to go away. It's going to do some verification. And then, of course, we can install Active Directory. And once Active Directory has installed, it's going to give us a reboot. Obviously, it's giving us some information about NT4. It's giving us a whole lot of information about DNS delegation. Don't worry, we will fix all of this up as we go through. The most important thing you're looking for is the prereqs have completed and all the checks are successfully. So scroll down and make sure you got this little blue icon and green icon, and then we're good to go. So now what we're doing is we're going and installing Active Directory. Once Active Directory has been installed, we can then bounce back into Azure. We can go to our DNS settings and we could add a custom DNS, and that custom DNS would be our server's IP address. And obviously we could go into our server's network adapter and we would change that IP address to static. The reason you would change that IP address to static and not dynamic, because by default it will be a dynamic IP address, is because a dynamic IP address changes. And if that address changes, you won't be able to connect to your AD server, nor will your users, and life will become interesting. So it's always good practice to make sure that if you have file servers, Active Directory servers, or any other server that you have running, that you assign it a static IP for administration uses as well, because again, you want to keep a static IP so that that IP address doesn't expire and you'll be able to connect to that machine all the time. So again, this can take a little bit of a while to install. So we'll just kind of wait for this puppy to install. Once this bad boy is installed, we'll go ahead and move through to Azure. Obviously, it's going to ask for a reboot, and that's fine. And when it reboots and we log in with VS admin and that password, that's automatically becomes our main domain controller administrator's account. Of course, you could add multiple administrators if you want to. And as you can see now, it's going ahead and it's shutting itself down. And we'll just wait for that to boot back up, and that will go ahead and reboot shortly. And there you go. As you can see, it's restarting. So I'm just going to bounce back into my Azure screen for you. So you should be able to see my Azure screen now. Let's have a look. Can you see Azure now?
Yep.
Yeah. So now we're back in Azure, and we're just waiting for that server to kick in and reboot. And we'll just give it a bit of time. So we'll go back to our virtual machine. And while that server is rebooting, we can do a few little things. Obviously, we can come back into our server. And this is the IP address we want. So I'm going to copy this and just say copy. And I'm going to bounce over quickly back into my virtual networks. I'm going to go to my on-prem, and I'm going to go down to DNS server. And I'm going to say, I want to use my Active Directory server. I do not want to use Azure's server. So obviously go ahead and paste your IP address in there for that server, and I'll click OK. And that's going to go ahead and save that. And that's the DNS address that we're going to use to get up and running. So again, we'll just let that carry on doing its thing. I'm going to bounce again back over into my virtual machine. I'm going to select my virtual machine. And again, on your virtual machine, this gives you all the information that you need to know about. Also want to show you something that I almost forgot. So I'm just going to bounce back over to my virtual networks. I'm going to select on my virtual networks. And of course, I'm going to select my interface. And of course, I'm going to go to IP configurations. I'm going to select my IP. And now I want to make it static. Remember I was talking about static? So I now want to make it static so that doesn't change. So I'm going to go ahead and save that bad boy there. And now it's saved that as static. If that was dynamic, obviously after a while, it's going to, the IP address is going to change, and then I'm not going to be able to connect, and my users are going to have a meltdown saying IT sucks. So we don't want to say IT sucks. We want to try and make sure our users have a good experience. So as you can see, we just kind of wait for that thing to save. So I'm just going to dismiss that notification.
Ryan, and for you, like in a because we're installing Active Directory, right? So in a non-technical way, what is Active Directory for someone that's brand new to IT? Because people get confused sometimes.
Right. Active Directory is a giant phone book of all your users. It has all the information like the address and phone numbers. So think of addresses and phone numbers in Active Directory as groups and users and policies. We will go through Active Directory. I'll give you a quick basic overview. So if someone's new to Active Directory, they can see what it is. Again, think of it as a giant phone book with all the information. If I want to go to Kevin's place, I would go to the phone book, I would search for Kevin. Once I find Kevin, it should give me Kevin's phone number, Kevin's full name, and Kevin's address and state and country. So think of Active Directory that it's a place where you manage all of your users in your infrastructure. So that's what Active Directory does. It manages all the users in your company as well as the resources. It gives users permissions to certain resources. Say, for argument's sake, you may have a folder called Finance and Payroll, and that folder, you only want the finance people to have a look at, not IT support and not the help desk, because it's got nothing to do with the help desk. And the same as the help desk may have folders with tools and utilities that they use to fix other people's computers. Again, the finance department doesn't need to have access to that. So it's also about permissions, locking stuff down and giving permission to people to access certain resources and certain information within the system. So I'm going to go ahead and fire up my DC again. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to quickly, obviously, connect to Active Directory. So what I'm going to do is we'll go back and say connect, because that server should have fired back up. I'm going to go to the RDP client. Again, I downloaded that RDP client already, but in case you don't know, you can select here and you can say download RDP, and I can go ahead and I'll open my RDP file here that I have already. I'll just show you. If you click open, it's going to open up in full screen. So I don't want it in full screen. I want to be able to edit it so it's a bit smaller so you guys can see what's going on.
I have to share your screen again because
Yep,
it's only showing the web browser.
Okay, cool. I'll just do that now. Just give me a second. And there we go. Cool. And share. Can you see it now? Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's like huge.
Oh, there we go. So can you see it now?
Yeah, I see remote desktop by itself.
Yeah, so I've got my remote desktop there. I've modified it so it doesn't go to full screen. And I'm going to say connect. I'm going to say OK, and that should allow me to connect. And I'm going to type in my password. Sorry. And that should now authenticate me. And I will just say share the screen again. It's just being silly.
There we go. Yeah, I see it now. See the whole screen for the remote desktop.
Cool. I'm just going to drag this over down a bit. So now we're waiting for our server to fire up. And we'll just give it a second. And then, of course, by default, whenever you install server, this is going to keep on firing up all the time. So you might find this frustrating. You can just go down to Server Manager and you can say, don't show me that. And you could right mouse click it and you could say, right, pin that to the taskbar. So if you ever need Server Manager, you can pin it to the taskbar there. So now this has gone ahead and it's installed Active Directory. So we can go to Tools, not Manage. And we come down to Active Directory Users and Computers. And this is going to fire up Active Directory Users and Computers. And we can then just go through Active Directory and give you a little bit of an overview. So I'm just going to take it to full screen so you guys can see it. And as you can see, we now have Active Directory. And we've got built-in users and groups and accounts. We've got computers. And of course, we've got domain controllers. And this is a domain controller. If you had all your users' computers and they were joined to the domain, all your users' computers would show up here in this list. Of course, and your domain controllers, and of course, you'd have all your users over here. But this is bad practice just to have users here. So another thing that you could do is you could right mouse click on the top of your domain. You could go new, and we could go ahead and create a new organizational unit. Now think of an organizational unit just as a folder where you're going to put stuff. So I might just call this, I'll just call this, say, sales, we'll call it sales users. So you could have as many folders as you want. So you can see now we've got sales users, but there's nothing in here. So I could right mouse click in here and I could say new user, and I could go ahead and add a new user. I'm not going to do that at the moment. We're going to do that just now. But just think of Active Directory. We can go in, we can manage accounts, we can give permissions, we can create groups, You can do a whole lot of stuff. If I click on the top here, you can see here, if I come through, we can create groups, contacts. You'd create a contact if you had an Exchange environment. You could set up your printers. You could create shared folders. You could create a user. So there's a lot of things that you can do in Active Directory for managing your users. But what we want to do now is we've installed Active Directory and we kind of say, well, that's great. So let's close this bad boy down over here. Sorry, hang on, not that one, this one. And let's go over to the Microsoft website and download AD Connect. And let's see if we can get this to sync with our Azure. So I'm going to go ahead and just fire this bad boy up, this web browser. And I've got a link here. And I'll just say, okay, for now. And I'll just paste that in. And this should take me out to the Microsoft website. You could do a Microsoft search for AD Connect, and you could go ahead and download Microsoft Azure Directory Connect. So we go ahead and let's download this bad boy. And as you can see, it allows you to connect it, Office 365 accounts as well. So I'm just I'll save it on the desktop. Let's save it on the desktop. And we'll go, okay. And we'll just wait for that bad boy to finish running. And it tells us that it's downloaded. So now we've downloaded Azure AD Connect. So now we want to connect this domain controller to our Azure Active Directory. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to go ahead and install this bad puppy. And now this is going to run through and give us a whole lot of prereqs and checks. As you can see, you get this little icon here saying Azure AD Connect. Now, this is obviously telling us some information, what this tool is going to do. It's pretty straightforward. We can say, I agree to the license terms and say continue. And of course, you could customize the settings. If you wanted to use customize, you could use customize and sync different things up. But in a real world environment, we would want to use express settings because we don't just want to sync some stuff up. We want to sync everything up, including our password hashes, our user accounts. We might even want to enable certain features. So again, let's use the express settings. And this is going to go away and it's going to gather some information. Now it's asking me here for the Azure Global Administration account. So you need to have an Azure account that has access to the Azure administration portal, or that has some permissions to install this. I'm going to go ahead and I'll just type in my password. This is my Azure account. So I have a user in Azure called Rock at this domain name. So again, I'll show you in Azure where that username is so that you have a better understanding of where you get it. But again, you'd have to be a global admin. So if you've got a user like Kevin, you'd have to go into Azure Active Directory and make Kevin a global admin in order to connect to Azure so that he can go ahead and install Azure Active Directory. And you're probably saying, okay, well, how do I make Kevin a global admin? So let me share my Azure screen again with you. And just
I have to unshare and reshare again.
Yep.
But this is easy. Anyone could do this. Even me.
Yes.
Like, I'm looking at it. I'm like, oh, this is easy.
Yeah, this is
connected.
easy. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to quickly share my other screen with you. Can you see my whole screen now?
Yep.
So I'm just going to bounce over to Azure Active Directory. I'm going to users. And there's that user. So let me just close this down so we don't need that. There's that user. So I would go into, say, for example, Rock. I would go assigned roles. And I would go, as you can see, he's been given the global administrator roles. If he doesn't have it, I'd say role assignments. And I would go here and I would type in GL. And that would find global administrator. The reason you don't see it here is because he's already a global administrator. But you would go into here and that's how you would add roles or permissions to people. For example, you could say, right, I'm going to give him device join permissions as well. You might say, let's scroll down and say, oh, I'm going to make him, I don't know, cloud application administrator as well. I'm just giving you an example here of how to add a role. And it's now given me those roles. And you're probably saying, well, but I don't see them. just do a refresh and there you go.
But
So that's how you add.
Ryan, I was
those-
gonna say that this is similar to when you add someone to a security group, an Active Directory. It's almost the same thing. Almost the
Yes.
same thing.
It is. It's exactly the same thing. And can you see my virtual machine here? No.
Yep. You see it.
So you can see my virtual machine. So I've given him access. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to say, let's go next. And this is going to go away and it's going to talk to Microsoft Azure. And it's going to say, does this user exist? Is this user there? And does he have permissions? Well, he does. Because if he did not, you would get an error straight away at this page saying, go and suck eggs, dude. Go back and check that you can connect, because you'll get an error saying Azure Active Directory could not authenticate you. So you get an error. And you'll be surprised how many people type the password and they carry on doing that and they get an error. So if you get this far and it's nice like this is good. So now what I need to do is I need to go and add in my username. So I would type in my Azure Guru slash, you could say myazureguru.com if you wanted to, and I could say slash VS. I just want to show you something, VS admin. And I will go ahead and type in my password.
It auto-populated for you too. It capitalized everything.
Yes. So then I can go next. And this is telling me this is going to do some bad. Go ahead. And now it's going to sync up. It's going to do bits and pieces. So hopefully I haven't broken my AD, because I did have this running before. So I uninstalled it and removed everything from Azure because I wanted you to physically see how it's done from the ground up. I didn't want to do stuff in the background. Are you with me? And then you kind of say, well, this is not working, or this is working, and you go and try it and it doesn't work. So this is going away and it's trying to synchronize, and this will now synchronize with my Azure Active Directory, because we've got all the correct information. Again, if you had bad information, you wouldn't get this far. I mean, it would kind of synchronize and then it will pop up saying sync error or something. I'm hoping it's not going to do that because of me having had it syncing up and then removing it. Hopefully it hasn't confused Azure, but that's how you install AD Connect. And we just give it a while it goes away and installs. It can take a couple of minutes to install. And there we go. Can you see now? It says verifying services to Azure Active Directory. So now it's creating an Azure Directory sync account. So this is good. So this is what we're after. Normally, if you get a sync error, I would say go back and look at your DNS settings. I would also say go back and double check your admin credentials because they may be incorrect. And of course, if you've got incorrect AD or Azure credentials, you can have issues. And as you can see, it says creating the Azure Active Directory sync account. Now, I'll show you where that sync account is so that you guys are aware of it and you're not going to get caught in a sense with your pants down. And a lot of people make a big thing, we've got to install Active Directory and we've got to sync it up and we've got to create a directory sync. Oh, this is going to be a problem. And they make it sound so technical and so complicated that you become afraid to do that. And you kind of think, well, do I really? Yeah, better get someone else that knows what they're doing. And as you can see, it's pretty easy to go ahead and sync our Active Directory with Azure. So once our synchronization is completed, we're going to go one step further. We're going to go to this domain controller. We're going to create a user, and we're going to see if that user syncs over into our Azure Active Directory. And as you can see there, it's syncing, it's saving those settings. Again, if your Azure Active Directory hasn't synced you will get an email saying your Azure Active Directory hasn't synced, go and have a look. I've got an email example to show you as well, so that you can at least be aware of what's happening. And there we go. It's going away. It's doing its thing. And bear in mind, if I had SSD disks in here, this would have been done already. This is because I'm using the cheap method by using standard HDD disks. And this will save you on costs. And this is a good way to learn both Azure Active Directory and, of course, your domain Active Directory. And as you can see, this is all great. We've got nice. I'm not too worried about this because we don't have too many forests. So we're not worried about enabling the Active Directory recycle button. This is just a lab. We're not going into that. So everything else is all good to go. So I'm going to click exit. So now I'm just going to drag this over and I'm going to come into, again, my users. And I'm just going to quickly do a refresh. There's that Active Directory sync account. Can you see that? So if you remove this, your Active Directory, in a sense, you have to uninstall Azure AD Domain Connect on your server. So that's our account there. So what I'm wanting to do now is let's bounce back onto our server. So we'll
awesome, Ryan, man. That was so easy. You made it look so easy. And people that are doing Helpdesk, don't be scared of AD Connect. Come on, guys.
No,
don't be scared.
No, like I said, there's no reason to be scared of AD Connect. So I'm just going to, again, quickly go back into my virtual machine. And if I come into my DC, because I think I closed it down by mistake, let's connect to that virtual machine again. And let's download that RDP file. I'm going to just, I'll just open it in full screen so that you guys can see AD nicely. And I'll just type in my password. And this is gonna give me a thing, say, yep, that's fine. I'm not worried about that. And let's just wait and see. And where's it gone? Okay, there we go. And as you can see, there's my Azure Active Directory. It's opened up in full screen. So what I can do as well, I can go start and I can come down to administrator, Windows admin tools. And of course you can see here, we've got Active Directory domains and trusts, Active Directory users and computers. So I'm going to go ahead and click more and then pin that to the taskbar. And I'm going to go ahead and fire up Active Directory. Remember, we've got our users here, so we can go through into our sales user. Let's go and create a new user. Let's call this user, say, if I can spell properly today, Sandy Lee. And I'll just call her Sandy L. And go next. I'll give her a password. I'm not too worried about that because this is just a lab. Obviously, in a real world, you would want that password to, let me just give me a second. In the real world, you'd want the user to change their password. Because if I said the user must change their password at next logon, that will prompt them to do that. But the reason we're doing this is we want to see if that user is going to sync over. So now we've created that user, Sandy Lee. So she's all good to go. So let's just do this. And you should still see my Active Directory screen. I'll kind of drag this a little bit so we can see what's going on. Just drag. Come on. Just drag that bad boy there. So now we can see we've created that user. So I'm just going to drag this to another screen, and I'm just going to move over back into Active Directory. And I'm going to go to users, and we just got to give it a second because Active Directory Azure does its own sync. Now, again, if we scrolled over and we came down into our start here, you can see here we've got Active Directory sync services, or should I say not AD sync services. This is not a lab on AD sync services. This is more to see if your synchronization was successful. And of course, we could come down to your tools. We can see different connectors. We've got actions. I can say run, and I'm going to select the Azure Guru. and I'm going to do a sync. So we kind of wait for that synchronization to happen. Again, you can also run it by coming over here and selecting the on Microsoft account if you wanted to export stuff. So this is where you kind of sync stuff from. Again, you can do a whole lab on its own. So while that's doing that, by default, sometimes it takes 15 minutes to sync up, but we've kind of done a trying to force it to sync up. So we'll give it a second and you will see my user will sync over. So these are one of the other synchronization services that you have. You can stop a sync, you can come down here. These are tools. These are the different connectors that you can click on here, and it tells you what's connecting to your Azure account. So you've got a lot of cool things that you can actually see what's going on with your on-prem stuff. So we just need to wait a little bit so that user will sync across. And the reason I can guarantee it'll sync across because we've got no error, but also it'll sync across because we've got our sync account. So we just need to give that a sec while that syncs. I mean, you can download a PowerShell script that'll force it to sync immediately. But again, I just want to give you guys a basic overview of how to install AD Connect and how to get it up and running in your prem. Again, if I click on AD Connect, this little button here, this is going to do the same thing. It's going to ask you to do a whole lot of stuff. You know, you can say this, you can configure that if you wanted to do your export settings or schemas, or you wanted to troubleshoot. So there's a lot of cool things that you can do. You could, for example, like I said, I want to customize my synchronization options. You can go next. And obviously you could type in your username. And we could go next. This is going to go ahead and verify those credentials. And I just wanted to show you this so that at least you have an overview. And if someone does talk to you about it, you're not going to run in hot water. You can see there's our Active Directory. There's our domain forest. I mean, we could go ahead and go next. You could say, right, what do I want to filter? You know, you could say, well, let's do certain OUs. And you can say, well, I don't want everything. I just want the users. Are you with me? Or whatever the case may be in terms of your organization. So this will sync stuff over. So we'll just give it a second while that does that. And then we'll just say, yeah, let's do.
You answered my question, Ryan. I literally was about to ask you that question. How do you sync a specific part of the domain controller? And you actually answered my question.
You just cherry pick what you want to sync across. And you can cherry pick, say, well, I don't want to, you know, so you can choose whatever you want to sync. So you can cherry pick that, or you can sync everything. You could do a refresh of the domain, and you could say here, I want password writeback, so that it writes back so that people don't have issues. You can do attribute filtering. You can do, again, a directory sync. You can say, oh, that's fine. I'm not too stressed about that. And now this will go away and it will kind of do those bits and pieces for you. Again, I'll just move over into here. And of course, you could say, let's scroll down and we can see that's ready to configure. And there we go. It's now verifying the synchronized service. It's saving those settings and you'll be good to go. So you can do a whole, in my opinion, I'd say you could do a really nice course on just purely syncing up AD Connect and getting your lab up and running. But if you do it this way, like we've just done together in this video, you can go away and you can create your own AD lab and you can practice Active Directory the traditional way. And you can also practice Active Directory on Azure itself. So we just kind of do a refresh again, and it's still thinking about it, but it will definitely sync across as it comes over. So we don't need that. Again, if I went into my users and accidentally, let's say I created a user here. So I just want to show any people that are new. We could say new, and we'll call this new user. I'll just drag him over here and we'll call him, say, Billy Bob. If I can spell today, guys, got fat fingers. And we say Billy B. We'll say next. We can make sure he changes his password. And we'll say, great. So if we've created a user there, that's fine. The reason I've created that user there, because if you created the user in the wrong place and you wanted to move them, you could just click on it and drag and drop that user in there, and that user be good to go. So basically giving you a basic idea of how to use Azure AD. So let's just drag that to my other screen. You won't see it for now. I'm trying to do a refresh, and there we go. Can you see Sandy Lee?
There we go.
There we go. And it won't take long for Billy Bob to go over. Now, let's say you created Billy Bob here, and you go, oh, I've created it in the wrong place. No sweat. Just drag Billy Bob and drop him in there and say yes. Come back to your users, and of course, do a refresh, and there's Billy Bob. And Billy Bob will sync over as well. So as you can see, you've now successfully created a domain controller. You have created a user and synced it up with Active Directory, and you've installed AD Connect successfully to your Azure Active Directory. Now, just bear in mind, if you want to get rid of AD Connect, my advice would be uninstall it from the server first, then go ahead. Once you've uninstalled it from the server, then you could go ahead, remove the accounts associated with that, and then you could remove this on-prem account. Because this on-prem account, again, it tells you here, on-prem synchronization service account. If you don't remove that, Active Directory is going to carry on syncing, and it's going to carry on syncing, and it's going to say, well, I can't find the server, and you're going to get spammed saying that it can't find that server. Again, with Azure Active Directory, it's the same as the other Active Directory. You can come here and you could create groups and memberships as you would within your Azure Active Directory here. You'd come down new and you'd create a group, and you might call this, I don't know, sales. I mean, if it's an exchange group, you would use distribution. You know, you could choose, okay, it's a global group, sales, and that would go ahead and create that group for you. You could put your groups in your different OUs and everything that you want. As you can see, there's that sales group that we've just created. If I went into properties, I could go members and I could add, and then I could go advanced if I wanted to. I'm doing this the long way just to show you. I would say find now, and I could say I'm going to add Billy Bob to sales, and I'd click OK and click apply. And of course, that group could also be a member of another account. So you might say, well, that group may be a member of backup operators or domain controllers or admins or whatever groups you would have here. So there's a lot of things you can do within Active Directory, and stuff that you do here will sync across to other stuff in here once you kind of start doing a refresh and Active Directory starts syncing up. So hopefully you guys have had fun in this video on, or this training lesson, should I say, on how to install AD Connect, how to get your domain controller up and running and talking correctly with Azure. And it's not that hard. Now, if we had Office 365 accounts, bear in mind, those users would automatically sync up with 365 straight away. So not only would they be in Active Directory, but they would also be in your Office 365 at the same time. So again, pretty straightforward. If somebody's forgot their password, you can always go in here and refresh that person's password by clicking on the password, clicking on the user and saying reset password, and going along and resetting that password. And then when that user needs to log in, it's going to ask you, but if you see here, it says, unfortunately, I do not have licenses to do that. So you have to buy a license for password writeback. So if you try and do that, it's because you're using AD Connect, you need to have a license to do that. So that's looking for an Office 365 license, or it's looking for a P2 or P3 license. And obviously that's an extra cost. So we don't have that, but I wanted you to be aware of that as opposed to going into our users and coming into, say, let's create another user, say like Ryan O'Connell. I could go in and reset his password here, and I wouldn't have any issues because it's directly within the Azure AD. And so that kind of wraps up installing and creating a DC and getting a AD Connect up and running in your environment. Any questions?
Me, no, I have no questions, man. That was fairly easy to set up for someone brand new to IT. So hopefully this video helps somebody out that's brand new to IT. My only question would be, like we spoke before, what's the cost and saving for billing, I guess, for the server and AD Connect? How do you stop services so you don't get charged behind the scenes?
Oh, that's pretty easy. So let's say you've done your lab and you don't want to be charged. You say, right, I've done my lab. Just go to virtual machines, go to your domain controller, because AD Connect is free. Stop the server, deallocate it, and you're not paying for it. And you're not paying for stuff for the users in Active Directory, because you can sync up quite a lot of people to AD. You only start paying for users when you're wanting to use things like password sync back. Then you need to buy a P1 or P2 license. And that can range anywhere from $9 to $20 per user per month, depending on what it is you're wanting to do. Again, like I say, for a lab scenario, just run that, do a refresh. Once your server's finished running, it'll be in a deallocated mode, and then you can shut it down. You're not paying for it. And then what you can do is you can carry on with that lab again, should you feel the need to work with that lab. And as you can see here, it's in a deallocated state. So when it's deallocated, you're not paying for it. Don't pause it, because you're still going to pay for it. So again, go ahead and stop your virtual machine. It's being stopped, so you're not paying for anything. AD Connect is free. You're not paying for users in Azure Active Directory. There's no cost involved in that at all. If you wanted to uninstall AD Connect, it's pretty straightforward. You just log on, you go to your control panel on your server, and you would remove AD Connect, and you would remove that account if you wanted to do that lab fresh. So again, we can quickly do that. That'll take 5 minutes to do. It won't take long. It's really quick to do that. So basically, we fire up our server. Once our server's in a running state, we can connect to it, and we can uninstall AD Connect, and we'll be ready to go. And again, once AD Connect has been uninstalled, we then go and remove this account by just clicking on the account and clicking delete, clicking on the account and clicking delete as well. You could enable password multi-factor authentication as well from here. So there's a lot of things that you can do in here that you can do on your server as well. So at the end of the day, like I say, it's not hard to do. If somebody just takes the time and spends a bit of time with you and shows you how to do it, then the rest is all good. But again, at the end of the day, it's all about getting your hands dirty, getting into the grind. If you're new to Azure, I would say go ahead and create a domain controller, install Active Directory, install AD Connect, practice, create a user account, see that that user account syncs over. Once you've done with the lab, you can go ahead and delete the whole lab, and that will delete everything. So I could go to that resource group, and that would delete everything out of that resource group. And then I could go ahead and remove that account. So if I wanted to, and say, okay, well, that's fine. Let's say I forgot to uninstall AD Connect, and you uninstalled it from the resource group, then that's absolutely fine as well, because it'll clear those resources and you won't pay for it. But it's not going to clear this out, because this is syncing with Azure Active Directory, because your resource groups are different. If I click on the AD lab, you can see everything that's associated with that AD lab over here. So in order to make things nice and clean, if you deleted all of this, that's fine, but then you are still going to have users in Azure Active Directory. If I come into my users, I still see my users would be there. The correct way to do this, we'll just do it really quickly, is we'll just go to virtual machines. This is how you should do it, guys, because this is how you would do it in the real world as well. We'd say connect, I'm going to do an RDP session. I'm just going to download that file. I'm just going to open it up straight. I'm going to connect to here. I'm just going to type in VS admin. I can say sorry, typed in my password wrong. So, cool. Oh, it's because I did a password reset on there. So again, you could always go into your virtual machine and do a password reset and connect as well. Let's just open up this bad boy. Let's give it a sec. Now I want to show you something. I've downloaded all these RDP clients, and this is struggling to connect because this is before we installed Active Directory and other bits and pieces, and before we had our IP address. So this was the new one that we've got. So let's open up this bad boy. Let's connect, because you see the IP has changed there, but the server IP is still the same. So we say VS admin. And just let that bad boy kick in. And I'll just wait for that server to fire up. Now what we can do is to remove AD Connect in case you want to practice and do this on your own. It's pretty easy. We just go search. This is the way I would do it, guys. And this is the way I've done it, and I know it works, and you don't have any issues once it decides to open up there. Come on. There we go. Bear in mind my server's slow because I'm using a standard HDD. I'll go to control panel. I'll just change my category to large icons. I'll scroll down to programs and features. And of course, I will come down here and I would start uninstalling stuff. So I could uninstall that because we don't need it anymore. And that's going to go ahead and uninstall that service. I'm going to uninstall that sync service. This is going to go ahead and uninstall that. And we could say remove. And this will go ahead and remove everything related to AD Connect, so that at least you can remove everything, uninstall it, and then, of course, you could then kill that server. You don't have to demote the domain controller. You can if you want to. If you want to play and demote the domain controller, you can. But we just want to install the Azure Active Directory domain services. And as you can see, it's doing that. So we just wait for that to uninstall. And remember, it's uninstalling a few things here. It's doing the command line utilities. It's uninstalling the SQL 2012 native client. And it's uninstalling SQL 2012 Express. And of course, you see here, it's uninstalling the AD Connect Health Sync agent. And what this is doing, it's removing that health agent, because if you don't do that, you're going to be spammed by Azure. It'll carry on saying, well, you know, server's not healthy, the server's not healthy, and you'd go and you'd have a look and say, okay, well, the server's not healthy. So I need to go and have a look at that. So we'll just let AD Connect come down and let that uninstall. It shouldn't take too long, should be pretty quick to remove. And I'll just minimize that while that's removing. And of course, you could also search AD Connect by coming into the portal here and going AD Connect. And if I click on AD Connect in the portal, I can go here and I could download AD Connect from here as well. And of course, this would tell you that AD Connect was successful because the synchronization stage is enabled. If it's the first time you're doing it, this would say disabled. So you could kind of go through here and you could look at the health monitor. You could enable rollouts for user sign-ons. So you could do on-prem applications. So there's a lot of things that you can do. So again, in the search, just type AD Connect, and that will go ahead and do that. So let's have a look and see how far this bad boy is done. And as you can see, this bad boy is gone and uninstalled. So we've got all green ticks and we've said yes. We could come back down here. And of course, you see it installed the monitoring agent for AD Health Connect. So again, we can come through here. And of course, you could uninstall that as well. And you could uninstall all the bits and pieces. So I'll just maximize that. And you can see AD Connect has been removed from here. So this health agent not only works with AD Connect, but it also works with Azure, so that if you are wanting to monitor your virtual machine, you can. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with Azure once you get to grips with it. Like I say, it's so in depth and there's so many cool things you can do. You can go ahead and do stuff. And if I come here, and obviously that's uninstalled, we just give it a while and that will disappear from there. So I would go ahead and close this down and say yes. And then what I would do is I would come over to my resource group. I would select my resource group. I would highlight my lab. And I would say delete. And now what that's going to do, it's going to wipe everything and clean everything out that resource group. Once that's been highlighted and deleted, we could now, in the meantime, go to Azure Active Directory. We could go to users, and you can see we've still got those sync users there. So I can click on that user and I could say delete and say, yep, delete that user. And that user is no longer there. This synced up with Active Directory, so I don't need that user there. I could remove that user, or if I wanted to keep that user there in a real world and get rid of my domain controller, I can. Then I can say, right, that user now is going to use Azure AD permanently because we've now got rid of our Active Directory domain controller. I'll just do a refresh, and as you can see, it's going away and deleting that lab. And that's all it is. Easy as 1, 2, 3.
That was easy. That wasn't complicated to uninstall. We install AD Connect from 0 and then we uninstall it. That's pretty easy.
Yeah,
so,
it's pretty easy. And as you can see, it connected up and worked fine. So again, nothing to be afraid of. I mean, people like to throw big technical terms around and make you a little bit afraid. Oh, if I do this wrong, it's not going to work. If you install AD Connect and you get errors, go and check your username, password, credentials for both your domain controller and Azure, and try again. And you'll find that you shouldn't have much trouble using it. But again, it's not a drama. Bear in mind, if you have multiple accounts in Active Directory, the sync can take a bit of a while to sync up. That's why when people migrate over in a hybrid environment, they do it in stages, in one bit at a time. So again, AD Connect works nicely with Office 365. I mean, your Office 365 accounts migrate really quickly because it's just a user account. That's all it is. With Azure Active Directory and on-prem AD, it's not just syncing your users. You know, you've got users, you've got groups and policies and all the other things that it's syncing with. So again, if you want to do a quick sync, as you saw when we opened up the sync tools, go and cherry pick what you want to move over, and that'll allow the sync to go a lot quicker and a lot smoother and get you up and running in the cloud really quick. And that wraps that up.
All righty, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you, Ryan, for sharing AD Connect on a simple level. I greatly appreciate it. So today we covered Server 2019, AD Connect, installing Active Directory, and how to remove AD Connect and how to uninstall the server and connecting everything to Azure. Pretty simple, not rocket science. I hope not.
No,
I hope not.
And like you said, it's pretty easy. It's just a case of playing And if you do it the way I've shown you, you can install AD Connect as many times as you want. You'll find once you've installed it 2 or 3 times, they'll be like, oh, this is not hard. I can do this pretty easy. And of course, there's a lot of good documentation out on the web about it as well. You can really go into in depth and use the syncing tools to your advantage. But at least as a new user, this will get you up and running pretty quick in your home lab and get you familiar and give you that hands-on experience that you need. So if you do go for an interview and they talk about AD Connect, you say, yeah, I've installed AD Connect. I've migrated accounts. I've actually uninstalled AD Connect from Azure and removed the sync account from Azure so that we don't get those alerts. So at least the person that's interviewing you will say, yeah, okay, he doesn't have a lot of experience, but because he's at a lab and he's played, and because this is how you would do it in the real world, it'll be good. Sometimes people might try and use AD Connect and it's not connecting because they haven't selected a custom domain. Are you with me? They're trying to sync with the Azure domain. And so that's where the issue lies. So if you've got your custom server on-prem, you just go and add your DNS address in there and your IP address and your network address, and you'll be good to go. But AD Connect is really good at going and finding out stuff and connecting for you. So
somebody was asking how to connect Azure Cloud to company site.
Exactly the same way, because your company site, you'd have an AD server on-prem. Just download Azure Active Directory and install it. It should connect. Obviously, you have to have a tenant in the cloud. If you don't have an Azure tenant, you can download AD Connect and it's not going to connect to anywhere. So you have to have a tenant. You actually have to have a tenant as a subscription. So you have to have a subscription in the cloud with a tenant. Like my tenant's called Rocket Labs. You may call yours Kevin. Your user may call it Bob, or it may be Microsoft.com or whatever it is. You have to have a tenant. Once you have a tenant, then you need to have a user in Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, that has global admin permissions. Then you can connect your server straight up to Azure. It'll go and find Azure for you. So you just need to make sure that you have the server admin username and password. You have a tenant and a subscription. Even a free subscription is fine. My subscription is pay as you go, but you can even work with a free subscription. It'll still work as long as your Azure username and your Azure user has global admin permissions. You shouldn't have any issues.
Got it. All right, guys. Well, that wraps it up for today. Thank you, Ryan, for teaching everyone. Do you have any final words you want to say before we let go, everyone? Ryan, maybe you have anything you want to say?
No, I just want to thank everyone for their time. I know you guys got a lot of better things to do on a Saturday than sit here and watch stuff. I know it's simple, but again, like everything else, we start with small steps and then we slowly move into the more advanced features of Azure. So that's my goal, is to try and get new people up and running with Azure pretty quickly, give them the hands-on experience so that they can at least do this in the real world. Most importantly, as the channel grows, then obviously the topics get more and more advanced. But it's a case of just starting off with the fundamentals and knowing how to do it correctly and knowing the reasons why you would want to do it and why we would have hybrid environments, why we have full cloud environments. In some cases, it may not even pay to have your Active Directory domain in the server. It all depends on your company. It depends on your company security policies. It depends on what information you have. So there's a lot of things that come into play. You know, the cloud is a great tool for your company, but again, it's not the silver lining as well. So it all depends on policies and procedures, budget, and your environment, budgets, and things at the end of the day. And again, like I say, moving into Azure, I can see Azure being a full hybrid environment because there are millions of companies that have servers on-prem. They're not going to just go and dump those servers. They're going to use them and get their life out of them. But also, again, sometimes it pays to have a server on site. I mean, what happens if the cloud goes down? And people say, oh, the cloud doesn't go down. Yes, it does. Azure fell over. Google's fallen over. Netflix has fallen over. Gmail has fallen over. So having an on-prem AD will still allow your users to work. Yes, you may have 365 users. It may be down while Microsoft are resolving the issues. That's why earlier on, I was talking about availability sets. So if you have 2 or more domain controllers, I could choose a different region. Because so I could have, say, for example, Microsoft might have a data center in New York, and then they might have another data center, say, in Texas. So I've got, or they might have another data center in the UK, so, or the Philippines. So having my that availability set allows my users still to work because it's high availability. I can always fail over to another region, so I'm not going to get caught with my pants down if my whole system goes down. So again, there's a lot of things that come into play when you're talking about migrating into the cloud, talking about using AD Connect. Again, it's what is your company's policy? What are they going to do? How are you going to do it? And does it make sense to do it? Sometimes they say no. I mean, if you've got sensitive information, people might be happy to have it on site, locked up in a room where they've got full control. Some people are quite happy to put it into the cloud because the cloud is good. You've got Key Vault, you've got really good security, and the cloud is a lot more secure and helps you. There's a lot more protection, I would think, against ransomware attacks because of the scanning features in Exchange, because a lot of the ransomware comes through via email. It's very rare someone's going to hack your environment and put a ransomware. They've got to get the ransomware into the system.
We just spoke about that too before we went live. Like someone got hacked. We just spoke about that. Very interesting conversation.
So they've got to inject that ransomware somehow, where the cloud, from my opinion and my perspective, has been really robust in combating ransomware. I mean, I'm not saying it's not impossible, everything is possible. But again, you want to mitigate as many threats as you can. You want to tighten security. The cloud has amazing security compared to on-prem. But again, on-prem security is fine. I mean, people have been using on-prem servers since NT4. So there's nothing wrong with them. It's just, technology is changing, time is changing, and we move forward with the technology that we have. So, yeah.
That's why we go over the cloud stuff, because in Helpdesk, I see Helpdesk as being the future with AD Connect and Azure, and you have to know these things if you're doing Helpdesk. So that's why we're going over this, because at some point everything's going to get moved over to the cloud, and then it's still the same thing. You're still going to have Active Directory and everything, but you have to understand how those technologies work on Azure side or AWS. So that's why we're going over the cloud stuff, because eventually everyone's going to move over to that, and then you have to get uncomfortable to get comfortable. Correct. And you have to start learning.
And I mean, growth is always uncomfortable, and it's uncomfortable because it's change, and change is uncomfortable because it's something new that you have to learn. Mm-hmm. But again, if you apply yourself and you can learn it, again, the on-prem stuff is going to be around for many, 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 many years to come.
Yep.
So it's good to learn the differences between Active Directory on a domain controller and Active Directory in the cloud. They basically do the same thing, but they look slightly different. So there's nothing to be nervous or scared about when you're working with the both versions of Active Directory. But again, they both have their pros and cons. So it just depends on you as an organization, what it is you're wanting to do. But not just Helpdesk, even as engineers, you may be asked to migrate people to Office 365. And you're going to do that with AD Connect, because all your user accounts are in Active Directory. And you're going to be migrating a whole lot of users over. And you could migrate those users over using a CSV file, which is a fancy word for an Excel spreadsheet with all the users' information. You just copy that Excel spreadsheet into your 365 Exchange or into your Active Directory, and it'll sync it up, all those user accounts, and it'll do it really quickly. So again, it just depends on you, your organization, and where you are going, but it's good that you at least have an understanding. So when people are talking to you about AD Connect, you can say, yep, I I know how to install it. I know how to uninstall it. I know how to deploy it. Yeah, I know how to double check that my sync is working. I know how to double check that everything is working correctly. If you don't see your sync account in Active Directory, then there's a problem. Go back and have a look. In some cases, the old analogy applies. Uninstall everything, AD Connect, and reinstall it again.
Install everything, yep.
And sometimes it may have just been a bug or something that it hit and just like, I don't want to do this, and you install it again and it works absolutely fine. You know, you have these things that happen. That's why people always, there's the old funny comments will say, oh, the computer's not working, restart it. You know, everyone knows that.
Yeah, the restart, man. Restart.
The restart, but yeah, it fixes certain things. So it's the same thing with AD Connect, you know, uninstall it and reconnect it again and practice and play. And that's the only thing I can say is practice and play, and don't be afraid, and you'll see things will just tick along.
Don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone. We went over AD Connect today, and it wasn't that complicated. If I could do it, if Ryan can do it, and I come from a restaurant background. I didn't know nothing about IT. If I could do it, you could do it. Anyone could do it. It's just a matter of you getting out of your comfort zone and actually learning the technology. Just go ahead, spin up a lab, start working on it, start understanding it, start learning it, and then you'll be on your way there. And then when you go to a job interview, you're like, this is what I know. This is what I done in the lab. Oh, you know about Azure? Yeah. Tell me more about that. And you start talking about your lab, and then you see like the spark come up in the manager's eyes. He's like, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. I want to hire this person. So that's why we make these labs. That's the important thing that you get out of this video.
I mean, absolutely, Kevin. And like I say, all companies still have on-prem Active Directory. So when you say, look, I've done an on-prem sync of Active Directory to an Azure Active Directory, straight away, people's interests peak instantly, because like, oh, this guy's, he or she's, she's played with it, he's played with it. It just gives you more favor when you're going in for that interview. It kind of pushes you to the top of the pile, because some people say, oh, well, I haven't learned AD Connect, but I can use it. And you can say, well, no, I've deployed AD Connect on a domain controller and I've set it up. And you probably say, well, how do we know? I mean, we created our virtual lab, and because we said in our virtual lab, we said we're not using the Azure AD, we're using the Active Directory AD. So it's a separate network altogether. We created a complete VNet. So it's a good way to simulate an on-prem lab, because not everybody's got equipment to create a home lab. Not everybody has all of the gear, because it's expensive. So creating this virtual environment is the key. I mean, it's amazing in terms of learning to get to grips with new technology and playing and studying and practicing. The nice thing is you can delete the lab, and this whole lab would have cost us maybe $3 to do, if that.
Yeah,
because it's nothing, $1 even, So it wouldn't have cost a lot. The only thing we would be paying for is the server while it was running, because AD Connect is free and Azure Active Directory is free. The only thing you want to watch out for is if you're wanting to do more advanced Azure Active Directory stuff, you need to then buy a P2 license or a P3 license. And that allows certain things to do with Active Directory. And of course, once those things are enabled, you can do a few more things with AD Connect as well. So that's how Microsoft make money. But again, we are just wanting to learn, get to grips. And this will be more than enough. I mean, you could actually migrate what you've done now. You could actually now sync your on-prem AD in the real world to your Azure AD if you had a tenant. If you followed those steps, you would do it with no problems at all. Obviously, like I say, if you have hundreds of users, it's not going to sync instantly. That's something that you may want to do on the weekend. But again, like you say, you may want to install AD Connect and do a cherry pick and say, I want to select this OU first and move these people. I want to select the users OU and move this one, or I want to move finance. So that's the key about becoming successful and a good engineer, is planning and thinking. Use the space between your ears and it kind of noggin. Use your noggin, and it'll kind of, things will fall into place. It's when we don't think we make mistakes, or when we're under pressure, we make mistakes. Or when we get the wrong information, we make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about trying to mitigate those mistakes so that at least you, as an IT tech, help desk, or sysadmin, are familiar with what's going on. Because trust me, there are sysadmins out there that are also nervous in moving AD. And people make such a big thing out of it that they scare a lot of people into like, oh, you better get someone more skilled and talented to do this. You are skilled, you are talented, you can do this. That's not hard. It's just a case of having confidence and saying, look, I'm going to do this. And obviously do it in stages. You know, when you're migrating over, don't migrate everyone, just do 5 or 6 people and then do the next 5 or 6 people.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you migrate everybody over, 99.99% of the time, I guarantee you're going to have some, stuff hit the fan.
You're going to have 500 tickets in the queue.
And then you're going to have people that can't connect, and life is going to become interesting.
Yeah.
And you're going to hate IT. So
Mm-hmm.
the key in any IT infrastructure is do a pilot test, and then move your users gradually. So if you want to move purely from on-prem to a cloud solution, do it in stages. And then once everyone's moved over and everyone's on Office 365, then you decommission your Exchange server because you don't need Exchange. Period. That's an Exchange server gone. And then you can decommission your domain controller because everyone's in Azure.
Mm-hmm.
So you're all good again. So there's all these things that come into play when you're talking about decommissioning stuff, moving people, migrating people, and resources. Again, you can use your file shares to create map drives, just like the user would see with all their files and folders. They won't know any different. For desktops, they can use VDI because Microsoft are moving away from terminal services. Again, VDI has a cost involved in it. So it all depends on your company's budget, what it is you're wanting to move, where you want to move it, how are you going to move it, and who's going to be responsible for managing and maintaining it. And of course, you work closely with your security teams and your other
departments.
The other departments to get stuff done. So again, not hard to do. AD Connect, as you've seen, you as a new user who've never used it, piece of cake.
Yep. You
can have your cake and eat it.
Cake and eat it. Anyway, guys, I'll let you guys go. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I hope you guys, as Ryan will say, I hope you guys stay awesome. And I hope you guys have a great weekend. And thanks for tuning in and thanks for watching. And we'll continue off next week. All right. Hope everyone has a good day and take care.
Awesome. Take care, guys.
Bye, guys.